Hi, welcome to the Kitchen Shrink, where real life meets real talk. We're Kat and Kel, two therapists helping you make sense of relationships, emotions, and everything in between. Pull up a chair and let's sort through it together.
Hey everybody, Kel here. Here's our question from a somewhat newly widowed man. My wife of 27 years died 8 months ago, and everyone keeps asking if I'm doing better. The truth is, I don't even know who I am without her. How do you grieve someone who was woven into every part of your daily life while also trying to figure out how to keep living your own? I'm really struggling. Well, boy, I just want to start out by saying our hearts are really with you. This is one of the most difficult things that you'll go through. Grief and loss is real. It's hard. So when you lose somebody that's been your partner for 27 years, we kind of expect you to be struggling, right? So I guess I would say, if we want to take a look at this clinically, it's been 8 months. You're right where you should be.
Mm-hmm.
I would say don't question your grief and loss here. It's kind of like a fingerprint. Everybody gets their own, and I think you're right where you should be. Clinically, we start kind of looking at maybe a year or more if we're still stuck in a place where it's just truly impacting our daily functioning, or if there was any trauma involved with losing that person. Then we kind of start to look at more of like a prolonged grief or complicated grief, but you are certainly right where you should be right now. And I know it's tough and it is a big struggle, and I just don't want you to question where you're at with that. One thing that I have learned even personally is everyone has such a different grief and loss journey, and you don't want to start to either judge other people's grief and loss, and you certainly don't want to question your own grief and loss journey, right? So if you've got people that are all grieving a specific person or a specific loss, everybody does it so differently. You could be looking at one person saying, wow, this person doesn't seem like they're struggling at all. They're hardly even seem to be impacted by it. And then you might have another that is very teary and can't get out of bed and is struggling with depression and motivation. And, neither are right or wrong. They're both right for exactly where they should be. It's when we start to question or judge other people's grief process that we can start to have difficulties in those relationships. So we certainly don't want you to judge your own. So we're glad that you wrote in and that we can kind of help you normalize where you're at right now.
And we have to remember that just like each experience of grief is a fingerprint, each impact of a life that's lost has an impact, an imprint, a fingerprint, if you will. And it's like 27 years is a really long time to say, like, I don't even know who I am without her.
Right.
Shoot, I've had water bottles that I have such a close attachment to when I lose them. You know what I mean?
No,
it's like,
absolutely.
Yes. I can be sad over something that's just so inanimate of an object. And so
right.
I think it's really hard too when you think of it being a human, a real person that you were connected to for that many years, that, I'm having people sit with you in that space really, to our listener of like that pain and that loss and that hurt is so worthy of just like somebody holding space for that pain and understanding. Like,
one of my favorite grief and loss specialists is world-renowned David Kessler. And just as a side note, he is very present on social media. He has groups that you can join on Facebook to help you through any type of grief, whether it's through a spouse, a best friend, a dog, a dream that you've lost, or a job that you've lost. So I would highly recommend either some books or check out his social media presence for David Kessler. One of his lines that he says, which just really resonates with me, is that grief must be witnessed. And I think that kind of bounces off what you're saying. So many people say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. Honestly, if you just sit with somebody and listen, talk to them about their loved one, ask for memories, and you just sit there with them, and that could be like salve on the wound. You don't have to say the right thing.
And I think that's good for other people listening who have watched somebody go through grief, like our listener, because when somebody's going through grief, a lot of times we don't know what to do and we don't know how to help. And it's like asking the question, what do you need, can sometimes just be more of a burden because they're already in the middle of trying to deal with something so monumental and so heavy. And so it's so true that it is just witnessing, like, tell me things you love about them. Sometimes people don't feel like, oh, I tried lightly, I don't want to make them more upset, but through tears, we actually release stress
Right.
hormones. We really allow
Yes.
ourselves to get out the hurt and pain from that connection. And so
Right.
it's absolutely okay. I think that's a good point
It
to be able
is.
to ask people questions and let them provide space for them to talk about that person.
Exactly. I think something I hear a lot is, other people's uncomfortability with
Yeah,
our grief. And it is hard. I think Western civilization, I think we kind of suck at grief and loss over here. I just think it's not very normalized. It's more of, put it underneath the rug, or we just don't know what to say, so we don't say anything. I mean, there are some countries that, they will literally wear black for an entire year to honor the loved one that they've lost as an outward signal of grieving.
Yeah.
I mean, we just don't do that well with it here. And I think, for
We push everything into a rush system. That's
Right,
like, come on,
right.
get over it. And
Right.
sometimes that is why people like our listener feel like, what's wrong with me, or why am I still in this space? Because it can
Yeah.
feel like everybody else can move on so much easier, but why not me? And it's like, you were married to
Yes.
this person for 27
Yes.
years. You shared every single detail of your life. A whole half of you does
Yes.
feel like it's gone. Like
Right.
two pieces of wood glued together. If you break those apart, there's a lot of splintering. It doesn't just break apart easily.
Oh,
It's
ouch. That's
has some pain.
Yeah, that's a great visual. I think, men, widowers especially tend to have like an additional layer of loneliness and maybe even identity loss, because men are often socialized to process emotion privately or stay busy instead of openly grieving. Oh my gosh, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're having
That
a
is
response to
so
that.
true.
Right. So, I mean, yes.
Their partner can be the one person that they're able to be that emotionally vulnerable with. It's just so true. Like, men are not traditionally taught to share emotions with their guy friends. So now
exactly.
you not only lost your partner, you lost the person who
Right.
holds your deepest stuff that you can't really share normally
Yes.
to everyone else.
Yeah, and
Dang, that's so true.
I know, and loss of identity as a spouse or a partner. I mean, it's so layered. There's so many layers to that, and I just want to reassure our caller or anyone out there that's going through this. Nothing is wrong with you. Grief and loss is really hard. Another thing I want to mention that's maybe a David Kessler saying was, he says, not all grief and loss has trauma. Meaning we know we're going to lose, we're all going to pass over or wherever you believe you're going at some point. So there's not always trauma with that. However, all trauma does have grief and loss, and that'll kind of break off into a little bit of a different subject. But, whether like trauma, if you look at having a car accident where there's a lot of trauma associated with that, of course, you probably lose your car, but I mean, you lose your sense of safety. You lose, that can go along for a long time where you just don't feel comfortable driving because you lost that sense of safety. I mean, you can lose a job abruptly, and that can feel pretty traumatic too. So, I mean, there's not always trauma around grief and loss, but all trauma does have some layer or layers of grief and loss. So I just wanted to mention that one. But I think, oftentimes the intensity of the grief can match the intensity of the relationship, and our caller's been married for 27 years. So, those are some years to be married, and there's a lot of intensity in that. So again,
Especially depending on the type of relationship, right? Because comparison can be a tough one, like you've talked about, where you see other people who are married for maybe a little bit longer, same amount of time, and they get over the loss of their partner easier. That says nothing about their resilience necessarily. It says a lot about the relationship. Some people, they grieved the relationship while they were in it, or they had more time to prepare, or the relationship wasn't that close. There's a lot of reasons why someone
Yes.
might come out of a grief season faster than you. And that isn't necessarily because it's 0% because you're doing it wrong. It's
Right.
just a difference in the type of relationship that was
Yes.
held and your ability to be prepared and ready and moved through the grief process.
Well, that's such a good point. So get a hold of this one, guys. I think this is so meaningful, and it makes so much sense to people when, if I see a couple and, I can, if they're going towards the end and they know they're going to split, sometimes we work on, just how to go through this as easy as possible, how to go through something really hard, a little less hard. And I think that, maybe one partner, I see this oftentimes, one partner has kind of made up their mind maybe a long time back, and they have just not either been able to get out of the relationship. There's, whether it's kids, I mean, I call it the bird cage. We start out with a platform, and life is good when we first start dating, and then you get engaged and you have a bar on the bird cage, and then you get married, you have another bar, kids, finances are different. I mean, religion, there's a lot of things that can maybe keep us in a relationship that isn't the healthiest for us. But at some point, one partner has probably thought about this for quite some time. They've grieved all of these different layers, maybe even the home they live in, their friendships that they have. They've done all this grieving in preparation to leave. And then when they tell their spouse or their partner, hey, I'm done, I need to get out of this relationship, that partner's grief process starts in that minute. Mm-hmm. And so, to that partner, it may seem like, wait, you act like you don't even care. Well, this partner's been grieving maybe for months or possibly years in preparation to leave, trying to keep the relationship working, and it didn't. So that makes a lot of sense for people that, hey, it's not that I don't care anymore. I've just been in this space of maybe not wanting to be in this relationship a lot longer than you have, and it can look like I don't care, but I'm just farther along in my grief process.
And sometimes when people have a chance with their partner because they know their partner is going to pass away, they have a chance to kind of talk through all those bird cage things of like, what do we do? Where do we go? And they can feel even like, okay, we're doing all the right things so that you can fly free once I'm gone, using that same analogy, right? But it's not until you lose that person that you really know how that's going to feel. Just trying to move that into like a grief or loss perspective, that there's times where that can be really helpful and you're like, okay, I'm ready. We've talked about it and now I'm going to be okay. And then there's other times where it's like, we talked about it and the grief, like you said, the grief process started when they passed away. I really wasn't ready. I really wasn't there. And so it can feel like, even though we went through all the things, my grief process is just starting because losing you hit me different than all the conversations around losing you did.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the other thing is too, I mean, if you have somebody that has a terminal illness and you know it's coming, I mean, it's so hard, it's sad, you're progressively watching them unravel in front of you. And let's say they have like a terminal cancer diagnosis, and that's what you're expecting, and you're working along and walking this journey with them, and then let's say they might have a heart attack and die before that. That changes your whole grief process.
It's so many things.
Yeah, it's like you just so start over completely. It's so complicated. So I think grief itself is not pathology, all right? Like, we don't diagnose pain. We kind of look at whether someone is gradually able to remain connected to life while carrying the loss, even if the sadness exists. When we go past a year or two and we're maybe stuck on some anger or some sadness or a specific piece of their death, I mean, that's when we kind of want to look at maybe getting some therapy. I mean, we are two therapists, but remember, we are not your therapist. But you might want to look at getting some therapy and getting some help outside of your own mind and maybe your own social circle or support circle.
And that can be true even if you're going through it and you feel like it's pretty healthy. Sometimes it's still nice to have somebody who can just like sit in that space, especially if your partner is gone and you kind of need someone to run things by.
Yeah, and sometimes we look at barriers. I mean, again, I will never rush anyone through their grief and loss process, but we want to look at, sometimes people think, well, if I heal and I have some moments of joy or happiness, that means I'm forgetting about my loved one. Or, if I show to the outward world that I'm doing great and I'm having fun and I have joy, then that says to maybe my loved one that I'm no longer hurting. I've forgotten about them.
I know. People have a lot of guilt around that. I've dealt with that with clients where they just feel so guilty for moving on. Even when they know that their partner would want them to. They still feel a sense of like betrayal that's not... that one's really hard for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, as we kind of look at tools for our caller, and I guess just to kind of summarize, but one is, don't judge your own grief process. You're right where you should be. Allow yourself that time to grieve. And also, we don't want you to completely withdraw from your life completely, right? So tools would be, even if you just do something small, where little small moments of re-engaging, where maybe coffee with a friend, or you go for a walk, or return to some of the things that you love. You don't have to, just wake up the next day and go all in, but just little tiny pieces of healing. That doesn't mean it's going to erase your grief, but we want to make sure that there's no isolation, because that can tend to deepen the suffering. And we know just recent studies even show isolation really has like the same impact as heart disease. I mean, it's really impactful. So that's what we don't want to see, is have you isolated and go through this process on your own. I'm hoping that you can find somebody in your world that can at least sit with you through this process. So, So as we kind of round out here today, I wanted to just kind of talk about the 5 stages of grief, and they're not linear. So as you listen to these, just know that you're going to bounce around in all of these for quite some time, and you will grieve her forever and ever. And here's the thing: it will change in character and intensity. I promise it will.
Yeah, my favorite meme is like that box where there's a red ball inside of it, and sometimes the ball is really small, and then the ball gets really big. And grief is a lot like that, where some days you're going by and you can, there's so much life, so much room that the ball seems really small, and you're almost like, oh, I forgot to think about her today, and that's okay. I'm moving on. I'm grieving, right? It's all good.
Right where I should
and then
be.
other days, it's like it gets really big, and you're like, man, it feels like it all came rushing back.
Absolutely. So here's the stages as we know them to be. So denial, anger, sadness, bartering or wishing, and then acceptance. And again, they're not linear, right? So let's say you're just stuck in sadness for a really long time, and I'll give you my own experience when my dad passed. He passed in January. That following spring, a bunch of my girl buddies had given me a gift certificate for a local greenery, and I went in and bought a really beautiful tree. And I was out there by myself planting this tree, and like out of nowhere, I had this wave of anger, and I'm telling you, it shocked me. I just felt so angry just at my dad, almost just momentarily, like, why the hell did you get sick? Why did you have to leave? And then just angry that, he was taken too soon. Angry for my kids that he's going to miss all of the things, So it was just, but what I've learned is, you want to just sit in there. You don't want to unpack in it. And then you kind of let the wave go back out, right? So what I want you to do is, as soon as you're feeling one of these feelings, notice it and go, hey, grief, I see you here on a Tuesday afternoon, right? It's okay. I'm going to feel this for a little bit, and then I'm going to let the wave ride back out. It is essential to notice that, normalize it, and just sit in that for a little bit.
And everybody has a different belief system around what happens when people pass. I do think that there is something really powerful to remembering that the connection you have to your loved one, while they're not here in the present, having some sort of connection to them in the fact that they're not alive anymore, whether that's sitting underneath the tree. I mean, that's kind of what made me think about it with your dad, or whether there's a sign or something, or when you have that memory that you almost imagine that they've emitted that memory into you so that they can feel close to you too. Something that helps you feel just as close to them in their death as you had in their life. I know for me, I didn't even have a great relationship with my mom, but I always say I have a better relationship with my mom now that she's passed than when she was alive, because I know that without the barriers of the human experience, that the mom that she would have wanted to be is the mom that she's able to be, because now she's not stuck in a body too. So there's just ways where we can develop some connection after people have passed away too, that can help with that grief process, where 27 years, if you get home and you want to sit around the table and talk to your wife as if she's still present,
go for
I think
it.
there are things where it's like, imagining her, how you do it matters. If you're remembering with a sense of connection, then it feels powerful. If you're remembering and being like, well, she can't answer me, she can't respond, then you feel sort of that lack, which can reinforce grief. So it's kind of how you do it. But just thinking with your dad in the tree.
Yeah, and another thing is too, and I really appreciate you saying that about your mom. I mean, and I hope that makes sense and really validates feelings for listeners who, after maybe they had a really hard relationship with that person or no relationship with that person, that is okay to either, some people are like, gosh, I don't even feel sad. Again, don't judge your grief, right? You're okay just where you're at. And I think we can grieve the mother that we never had, or the father or the partner. I mean, you can grieve that relationship, and people, I mean, it sounds like a strange concept, but it's such a gift to people to say, look, you get to grieve the parent you didn't have when you were little. That's okay, right? It's a thing. So again, I want you to be able to just sit in that, notice it, and then let the wave ride back out. It's okay. You're going to be okay. I promise it'll get easier in time, but right now you are right where you should be. So for our listener, yes, we are here for you. And for our listener, we are sending you big love. Yeah. Thanks for being here today at the Kitchen Shrink. We talked about some hard stuff. We're really glad you showed up today. Be kind to yourself and stay connected. We're Kat and Kel, and we are here for you. Real talk, real tools, and real life.